It's Tony's Eyes here with Andy Halco. Welcome to the SaaS Founder Show. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing great. How about you, Tony?
Awesome. I'm excited to be
Yeah.
back here live on one of our shows. We haven't done a live show in quite some time, and this is actually the first of our SaaS Founder shows that we'll be doing live here today.
Yeah, this is fun. I like going live and getting questions from folks and just hanging out and talking. And, it makes it great for this conversation in our SaaS Founder Show because we can go in a lot of different directions, have some fun, and, just talk about how do you grow a company. So it's cool.
Yeah, for sure. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. Today we have a special guest, Dan Pantello from Marpipe.
Hey guys,
Dan, how are you doing?
Hey, good to be here. What's going on? This is like
awesome.
The Twitch of podcasting. I love this.
Yeah, it's awesome. So welcome. Thank you for joining. We've had a chance to correspond a little bit. We're excited to have you on. We think you have a really cool product out there. We want to hear about it. We kind of want to find out the story behind it. And I guess, to start with, I just want to share that if anybody's, for our live viewers, feel free to enter questions into the comment section, and we will see those and we will get to those as we go. But with that, Dan, I just would, love to hear a little bit about your story and tell us about Marpipe.
Yeah, totally. So first off, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I'm super excited about the reboot of this show and honored to be the first guest on. So this is great. And I'm excited about the community you guys are building. So to answer your question, Marpipe is the first multivariate testing platform for ad creative. Essentially, just to give you like a little bit of context on the story there, and then maybe we could get a little bit granular. We actually started off as a performance marketing agency that specialized in working with venture-backed startups. So our first office was in Soho, and we were working with a bunch of companies that had just come out of Techstars and Y Combinator and raised a bunch of capital from venture firms. And today 40 cents of every venture dollar goes to Google or Facebook, right? And so we were at the right place at the right time doing performance marketing. They needed to spend all this money to acquire customers. And, I was like, hey guys, I'm right here. You can poke me whenever you want. I run an agency. We can work together. It started taking off from there. Essentially we quickly discovered, as an agency, we were under a performance mandate, meaning all our clients cared about was how much money did you spend and what did we get in return? We quickly realized that the thing that influences performance by far the most, and a lot of performance marketers are already familiar with this, but the most influential element to performance online, more influential than audience targeting, than reach, than even brand, is actually your creative. And when I say creative, I mean what's the visual stimuli within that little piece of real estate you're paying to show someone on a screen? What colors is it? Where's the product featured? What angle? Does it have shadows? All of these granular elements. Even if you take one ad and you just change the background color from blue to green, or if you just, we would change a cactus somewhere in the background with a palm tree, we would see major changes on performance. If you didn't see that the ads looked similar and you just looked at the numbers, you'd think they're totally different ads, right? And then that's when we kind of stumbled upon this little realization. We were like, well, if creative is so important to performance, how is it that we make creative decisions today? How do we decide what our ad creative looks like? The question of the way creative works today, how we make creative today, is exactly how you think it is. There's no secret sauce. You hire a designer that makes something cool. They're like, do you think this looks cool? I think this looks cool. And if you guys both agree that it looks good, you run it as an ad. At the highest level of agency, that's a really quick rundown of how it works. We're kind of still in the Mad Men era. If you watch Don Draper pitch in Mad Men, it still works a lot like that today, right? This has been the creative workflow has been undisrupted. It feels like every part of the marketing process has benefited from data science and automation, except for creative, right? It's we're just guessing still. We're just arbitrarily taste making. And our thesis was, like actually ad creative is not an art. It's not like just a strictly artistic endeavor. It's actually, because we can quantify how people and audiences react to visual stimuli, we can actually attribute like a scientific element to this process, right? If we can quantify all these things, then we can inject the data science into the starting point here, right? And use data to drive our creative decision making rather than just guessing and checking, which is like really time consuming and expensive. And so that's where the idea for Marpipe came from. Like Marpipe is really what we see as the first way to actually inject data into the creative process from a starting point. Like when you have anyone watching this show is probably a founder and has a product idea or is interested in entrepreneurship. And like when you have a good product idea, you're probably thinking, oh my God, this is so great. There's so many good things about this. Here's a whiteboard with like 10 value props. And here's all these things I could show about why this product is so great. Well, which one are you going to show in your ads, right? That's super important. And what Marpipe allows people to do is essentially based on some like the inputs of just like some messaging variables, some creative variants from your brand, some background textures, things like that. We automatically generate essentially kind of like every creative possibility and rapidly test it in front of your audiences on Facebook and Instagram. And then we tell you really quickly, like not just which is the best combination of variables that works best, essentially telling you like your best case scenario, but also we tell you why your ads work, what people most love to see and hear from you in your creative and what they hate to see and hear from you from your creative. So that's the story of like how we started and kind of like where we are and what it does.
That's really awesome, and it's a great story. Tony and I talk a lot about spin outs. You're in an existing business, you find a problem, and then you try and spin out a product from that. I'm kind of curious to start, like, one, are you still in that spin out stage where you've got an existing business and you're creating a product? And, whether you're in it still or not, how do you find that process and that challenge of trying to build something while you've got another, business running?
That's an excellent question, and it gets actually you're shooting right to the core of like our biggest business challenge actually. So essentially we were running I was running a fast growing agency. It was called the Pantello Group. We were doing really well. It was a high cash business, but it was low margin because agencies are like a business that runs on like people in seats. It's a people business. And that's also why agencies have like a low revenue multiple when they're valued by investors and things like that. I mean, it's like, it depends on the people you have there. I actually it was a great business to have, but I knew it first off, it wasn't scalable, and second, it was non-unique, which made me less interested in scaling it. I'm in downtown Manhattan right now in Tribeca. There's like 5 agencies on every block.
Right.
The world doesn't need another agency. There are a lot of really good agencies out there. And when we first started building Marpipe, I actually just used the profit from the agency to hire a few engineers and pointed them at this problem. I was like, can we solve this? Like, can you just start working on it? Like, let's see what we can do. And at first, the angle was, all right, this is going to be like our secret sauce as an agency, right? Like we're going to have like this thing that no other agency has, and that's going to give us like the differentiation that we need. And so we started building it, and we guinea pigged it on a bunch of our clients, and we screwed up a lot along the way, with their consent, of course. And we finally got it to a really good spot where we could actually automate the rendering of hundreds of ads, the deployment of them through the Facebook API, the analytics component that tells you exactly what to do next. And so when we first told some of the brands we were working with why their creative works well and why it doesn't, they had never saw data like this before. And these are folks spending like $1 million a month on Facebook ads, right? We were just showing this to them for the first time. And then they shared it with all their friends. And then we had a bunch of people, I just had a bunch of inbounds being like, hey, Dan, I know you have an agency. I don't care about your agency. I already have my own. I just care about how did you get this data for this particular brand I know, right? I saw what you did. How'd you do that? And that's when we like really knew that in trying to fix our own problem, we discovered that we could actually fix a problem for a lot of other people too. And that's where venture money comes in. So we were like, we built this because we first looked for like a product like this online. We searched like the internet for something that could do this before we built it. And we just couldn't find anything. So we were like, let's build it ourselves.
Right.
So then, we showed like these like early prototypes, which was like a lot of raw code to some early investors. And we ended up actually raising in this last December, in December 2019, we raised a $1.8 million seed round from several VCs here in New York, but also we're backed by Adobe and MediaMath, which are just like some of the best, if you're building a creative technology product, those are some of the best investors to have on board. And they saw the uniqueness of it, and that this hasn't been done before. So that gave us the freedom to actually when we raised, I was like, agency business is done. We're cutting it off completely. We're not focusing on this at all. Yeah. I told my clients, the party's over. We're moving on to this other thing. You can join us in this other thing if this is interesting for you. Or you could, I can refer you to some of these other awesome agencies that can take over your account. We had to do, and honestly, in order for me to do that, it was like ripping a Band-Aid off. My team had to back me into a corner and like get me drunk and convince me to do this.
Yeah.
I didn't want.
I get it.
As a founder building a bootstrap business, letting
your baby
clients go that were so hard earned is so hard to do. But you can't build two businesses at once. Exactly. I don't think it's possible to, unless you're Jack Dorsey running Twitter and Square at the same time, I don't think it's possible. I think it's superhuman to be able to, and I think it's a totally unreasonable expectation for a first or even second time founder to try to run two businesses at the same time. And honestly, you're taking away effort from whatever it is. Like, you just need to decide what's the most important. And then if that's the most important, is it worth it to take away your time and effort from that to focus on this other thing? 99 times out of 100, it's probably not. And so we had to rip the Band-Aid off completely. We told the customers to go home. We buckled down, and with that capital, we're able to focus on building product for the first half of this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how.
Yeah, you totally answered my next question, which was, do you think you could have done it and kept the company? Because we deal with so many companies like this, and I completely agree with you. If your effort and resources are diluted and split, it's just so hard, to really get traction. But there's a lot of folks out there that they just, keep pounding away at that, and it ends up being a losing game. So I appreciate you saying that.
I think it's I think it comes down to kind of like a ratio of like the uniqueness of the thing that you're doing, and like the automatability of that, right? Like, for instance, you can probably run 10 drop shipping businesses at the same time, right? Because those are non-unique. You're not inventing something new. You're not shifting something new onto a market that you have to educate. Like, you're playing with like basic economics, that you can kind of like automate and pull levers for, and you can, once you set one up, you can put someone in charge of it, go on to the next thing. I see this happen often, but I think when you're trying to genuinely invent something new that requires like some of the best talent in your space to ship, it requires educating the market. Investors are excited about it. Like, it's your responsibility to your ecosystem to like put your 100% focus into it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, well, even with simple businesses, there is some level of distraction that comes with it. I'm kind of curious for you to put time frame around that, because the other piece that I think people don't realize is they listen to these stories and think, okay, wow, that happened over 30 days. I went from being in this agency to building a product to, testing it with clients to raising capital, et cetera. And, you say it and it sounds quick. What happened there? What's the time frame that happened in?
Yeah. So like 100% patience is key. In this kind of game. At the same time, you do have to move fast and run. And the best, like I think one of like the hallmarks of like the best founders and operators I've ever seen, like one of the best traits that they have that I can immediately, if they have this, like I can tell, like, wow, that's an A++ operator, is their ability to come across like an interesting opportunity and immediately actualize it, right? Meaning like no like drawn out negotiation period, or like they move fast, right? So like at the same time, moving fast is important. To put it in context for my journey, I started the agency. I started running my own agency business around maybe I'd say 4 years ago is when I started. Was when I opened up shop. Actually, this was right after I graduated college. I was doing a lot of freelance work in college. I'm 25 right now. We opened, first thing after college was I opened up shop in Soho, had an agency for around 2 years, at which point we decided, hey, that's when we kind of stumbled upon this, like, let's go into this focus, like, let's be the testing agency. And then we built out these tools, and then, around like maybe half a year to 3 quarters, I was focusing on like building the tools out in the agency. Then we raised, that was about a year ago. And so it's about a year that we've been fully all in on Marpipe, and we actually just shipped our like public beta our public beta just launched this quarter. It's been a crazy journey since that launched. In Q3 of this year, we grew top line revenue 80% month over month on average ever since we launched product. So that's been a pretty crazy ride. But it's been several years in the making. And I don't even think we've made a scratching the surface yet. Like we haven't even like I'm so early in the journey right now. There's still so much to be done. Like I'm not speaking from a place of look at how much I've accomplished. I don't think I've accomplished anything yet. So yeah.
I like the quote speed to fail, like you said, you have to have patience, but you have to figure out what's not working very quickly, and that's why people talk about launching an MVP really fast, minimal viable product. You want to get it out to the marketplace, test and understand, is it viable? Will people pay money for it? And I kind of always like that speed to fail, is that you want to learn what's not working fast so that you can really focus on what is.
I agree with the idea that if you're not embarrassed by your first product launch, you've launched too late.
Mm-hmm.
That's so 100%. Like when we first launched our product and we had the first few users in it, it was crickets. Like you have to have this like weird mentality that's honestly kind of bizarre to think that like the thing that you spent half a year building just exclusively focused on this, that you just showed to some people, it's like crickets. Wow, they don't like it. Well, you have to have the mentality to think, okay, well, no, we have to keep going. Like we're just not there yet, right? It's not like people don't hate our idea. We just haven't shipped it the right way. We need to continue to iterate on it. And I think that's a big there's figuring out what's not working and moving for it quickly, but then the counterweight to that is like figuring out like maybe it's not working because we didn't do it the right way, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I like to call it the event horizon of like features and user experience. Like if black holes, there's an event horizon where up to the event horizon you don't get pulled in, but as soon as you hit that event horizon, you're just sucked in.
Yeah.
And how do you as a founder and as a team determine, get to that event horizon where folks get in and they just, gravity just pulls them to the point that they can't get away from your product, and if you can, it's hard to get that event horizon out of the gate, but you can work to get there where you're improving features, and then you create that. And that's the point where I think things really take off.
100%. I think it was like the story, like this reminds me of like the Airbnb story. Like when they first launched Airbnb, like it was like there was zero adoption. People thought it was bizarre. They didn't like it. And the founders found out that after they were like on their like last few dollars, and they found out that there was like an insanely high, like diving into the metrics of their application, they discovered there was a super high correlation between the quality of the photo listings in the listings and like the engagement rate in the app. So they went personally. They did something intentionally unscalable, which you need to do in the early days always. And the founders went to all the listings in New York and took learned how to do professional photography and took professional photos themselves. And then that was like one of these like major unlocks for them, where like suddenly all the listings had super high quality photos, and engagement in the app just went up from there. And I guess that was their like event horizon, the way you described it. Yeah. So.
I heard with YouTube that there were a bunch of different video sharing or video platforms out there. And that with YouTube, when they developed the embed and people could put their videos on other websites, was like one of those turning points that other products didn't have, and really just shifted YouTube's trajectory.
Right.
So, I mean, it is interesting when you think about something simple like that, but how much does that change the value proposition for what you're doing? Because it changes the concept of it being just presenting video to people, kind of democratizing it where anybody can utilize it. So
right.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep.
So Dan, I would like to know, like, what does the competitive landscape look like out there? Because obviously you've hit on, a challenge that exists and has existed for a long time. What are alternatives that agencies are turning to that, problem that you're solving?
Yeah. So today, agencies and in-house teams, when it comes to like batch rendering and testing of creative, there's kind of two paths that exist today. One, you could go with like the super old school route, which is like a survey agency, which really doesn't solve the problems of the problem with testing is that it takes too long and it's really expensive. Survey agencies don't really cure either of those. Now, then you have, there are some like large kind of like creative technology companies in this space, like Thunder and Celtra, which they actually, they deliver some of these services and like fragmented products that help along the workflow. And what's actually like what's interesting about those is that they're not very accessible. Like their products are, in order to like access their products, you know when you go to a site and you're like, oh, this technology is so cool, and then it's like talk to a sales rep, and you're like, oh man, like I don't want to book a call with a sales rep where they're going to try to like they're going to try to qualify me, and if my brand isn't spending at least $100K a month on advertising, they're not going to want to talk to me. And like, you're going to have to go through you're going to have to talk to the SDR and then the AE and go through this like enterprise like deal flow. That's so not SaaS, right? Like SaaS is product first. We want to have product-led growth. I don't want to sell to CMOs and have CMOs force their operators to use my tool. I want operators to be able to access and use my tool, put my product first. They love it because it just makes it so affordable. It's cheap. It's freemium. They get in the experience. They get hooked on it, and then you can't rip them away from it, right? Like that's the idea that like we're approaching the market from a bottoms up perspective and a product led perspective, where what we're doing is we're shipping a freemium product. Like you can go to marpipe.com, sign up, and get started, and use the same tools completely underpriced as you would find in some of these top competitors. And we're not afraid to put our product first because it's designed really well and it's fun to use and it's addicting. And so as an operator, as someone who's like a creative at an agency or an in-house shop, you could just swipe your card or like your company card if you need to upgrade to a paid plan, or you could just start for free. and be like, hey, look, I just made 100 creatives in like 2 minutes using Marpipe for free, which you can do today. And that's the difference of how we're approaching the market. And we also have like, we can get granular on like how we have all the tools necessary in the workflow for testing, and some of the other folks don't, but I'll spare you the technical details there, and folks can just check out the product for themselves and see.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I'm kind of curious, and I'm always curious about the business side of things. Do you have a background in like development or UX, or do you really rely on other folks for that type of stuff?
Yeah, no. So I'm a marketer by trade. So my background is in performance marketing. So that's really like that's the world where I come from, and I identify personally like as a performance marketer. And if I had to get a job at a Fortune 500 somewhere tomorrow, if I was forced to, gun to my head, I'd probably go to the marketing team, right? We're like in building, you don't need to be an engineer to build a technology company, right? You just need to find really good engineers to help you along the way. Right. We first started like the first engineer I ever hired was just like our CTO by default. Like, it's like, we don't have anyone else. He's been here the longest. He's the CTO, right? As we got more sophisticated as an organization, and our engineering team exceeded 5 people, that's when we needed like some better management, and some folks who have like seen it and done it before. And so like talent, if you're building a SaaS company, and you look at all the SaaS companies that have like just really crushed it, who have become like unicorns, like their early stage talent is insane, right? Like, yeah. The hallmark of the way I look at it is like, as a founder, I really have 3 jobs, and this is like, one of them is finding and retaining and incentivizing good talent. The second one is talking to investors, and the third is making sure that we have money in the bank, right? Like, if I can do like those 3 things really well, like I'm doing my job as a founder, right? And so the talent piece is like often the hardest. Sorry for the sirens in the background. It's New York City. So yeah, we ended up hiring a CTO who like had 2 exits under his belt, built a previous venture, that he sold for $75 million. And that was like 2.5 years ago. And so we ended up getting him on board, and it was like night and day. It made a huge difference for our team. And so we started off just like building like a small scrappy team with what we could. Obviously we couldn't pay fair market prices for engineers. There are other advantages we had to, like, as a founder, you have to be like, well, you could get paid more working for this big company, but you could have the freedom to like operate on your own. You have to really sell like the advantages that are so real about working with startups. Like, you're going to learn so much more. You're not going to be micromanaged. You're going to be able to grow really fast on your desired career track. You're going to be able to pick which projects you want to work on. And those are the things that, a lot of engineers who are really good are like, you know what? Yeah, like I could take a $20K per year salary hit in exchange for like actually loving my job. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So you start there, and then you have to find and hire, and which is really happens early days through network. You have to find and hire like those really good kind of like executive roles. That's really, we're sizing up right now, and we're actively hiring and looking for more folks. Like right now, my big challenge is we're looking for a world-class customer success leader right now, which is so hard to find. It's really hard to find like a good customer success person to lead that. So yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
No, I was just going to ask, what does your team look like right now, Dan?
So right now we are 13 people going on 15. We've got 7 engineers, 3 people in design and product. There's me, there's our COO, and then there's our salesperson, right? So it's like majority engineering and product. Like, aside from engineering and product, there's me, our COO, and our salesperson. So like small, scrappy team, and we're currently hiring an experienced sales leader to head up biz dev and customer success leader. So, yeah.
So I know a lot of startups and software folks that even in this crazy time are looking to hire and, like you said, find the best talent. So, how do you go through that process? Where do you look and how do you evaluate, especially on the engineer side? And I think there's, my question kind of is really around the idea of like, most of the founders I know are struggling to find those great folks. And how do you make even the determination that someone is going to be great? How do you do that?
Yeah, so we, right now, like, we've been doing it primarily through network, right? We have so network building is really important to do, regardless of whether you're a founder or not. You should have, like, I recommend this to everyone. You should have a monthly newsletter that you send out to interesting people that you meet professionally, right? I have every month I send out an update to around 500 something people that is like really interesting people I've met along my professional journey that are investors, high-level marketers, like creatives, just people I think are like doing really cool stuff in the space. And I just give them a monthly update and I'm like, here's what I'm up to here's what I learned this month, here's where I screwed up this month. And the open rates and the engagement and the responses on that are incredible, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just like an open diary to people I've met before, where you could just keep up with what I'm doing every month. Everyone can do this, right? I recommend everyone to start. Like you should start immediately. This is like, I think it's the best way to network build, because now I'm keeping in touch with people I've met like 3 years ago who I would never normally be talking to anymore, but they know what problems I have today and they can always like chime in to help. So essentially that's also been great for biz dev, by the way, too. But network building and then leveraging the network is great. The disadvantage of it is lack of diversity. So the thing is like right now, we definitely prioritize building out a diverse team with like a diverse background that comes from different places. When you are only looking in your network, it's hard to find candidates that would normally be outside of the range of people you would encounter or meet, which is a substantial challenge. And it's something you have to proactively work. You have to like work to try to find and be inclusive of considering candidates you wouldn't normally find. That's something that is like a disadvantage of it, to be frank, and something we're trying to work against. And so we supplement that with trying to put out like job postings on the sites and talking to recruiters from different places, and like using that to inform our process. So it's a hodgepodge of things, but when it comes to like that's sourcing, when it comes to vetting, we have like an unorthodox kind of like approach. I think like if you ask anyone who's interviewed with me, they'll tell you it's the weirdest interview they've ever had. I like to ask weird questions that like take people kind of out of their comfort zone. My favorite question to ask people is, and the reason I do this is to assess like culture fit, because we're kind of like a ragtag group of weird people, and in order to fit in with our team, like just culturally, you have to be like kind of like comfortable encountering situations you wouldn't expect to. Like, and particularly what I mean by is like if we say, hey, like here's this new problem that like you wouldn't normally be asked to solve it, like anywhere else, but like here we're asking you to like try to figure it out, right? Like this is a naturally uncomfortable situation. What I try to assess quickly is like your level of comfort with being uncomfortable,
right?
And challenging yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so like that's why I like my favorite question I ask is like, and this is one that like I remember everyone on my team. I remember all their answers to this. This is like I love this question. It's how likely do you think it is that we're currently in a simulation right now? Like and I don't like we're not trying to just like ask people weird questions just for the novelty of it. I've genuinely heard like insanely thoughtful answers to these questions that tell me like a lot about how people think. Like if you're just like, I don't know, it's like, okay, well, you're probably not I probably wouldn't be interested to talk to you at a bar, right?
Right.
And those kind of things are important for team chemistry overall. And so, there's those culture fit questions that like I like to ask people. I always take the first interview, and I try to assess culture fit, and I try to assess like personality type and whether this is someone who would fit in with the team. Then they have a second and third meeting with the folks that they would be reporting to that would assess technical aptitude. So like, you would then meet with the CTO, and the CTO would be like, all right, do you actually know Ruby on Rails, right? Then we'd get technical and find out those things. But like, I think it's important as a founder to like take the first meeting always. Like in the early days, like sub 20 people, you should be the first one to meet with every employee because you're the one that's going to be best able to explain the vision, the mission, sell the premise of the company, the excitement of the workplace, and assess whether they'll be a fit with the rest of your crew. So.
Right. Oh, that's great. You had mentioned in your message out to your network about mistakes. I always love asking people, so what's the biggest mistake that you think you've made kind of in your career or in this product process?
Oh, man. Biggest mistake. I think that my biggest mistake was actually there are certain people, like as you scale your business, there are certain people in the early days who are no longer right, who like you as a company outgrow their skills and don't have the time to wait around for them to develop, so you do need to make hard decisions about talent and team. And I think the area where I struggle is candidly pulling the trigger on some of those decisions.
Right.
And because it's really tough. And it's people's lives.
Yeah.
And there's an aspect of loyalty, that is like, am I being like a shitty person? Or is it just like business is business, yeah. Right? And it's kind of tough to separate emotion from those judgments. And I think some of the things that I had to do, like bringing on that new CTO and shuffling the team around, I should have done that much earlier, right? My biggest mistake was not pulling a trigger on that earlier on in those days. And even today, we still have some challenges on like in that department that need to be met, and those are like the places where I tend to make the biggest mistakes on, like lingering for too long, and not like I have a duty to the organization to make the right calls, and so like that's kind of the area where I as a founder, like my lead investor tells me that I'm like loyal to a fault. And so sometimes that can hurt you, yeah. And so that's one of my biggest challenges, and it's the source of like, I think where my biggest mistakes were made early on. Yeah.
I've had my business now for 18 years, and what I've tried to come down to, and you kind of hinted at it, is your duty. And I always try and think about what's the greater good. If I've got these other 20 folks sitting here, and this one person, what's the greater good for the team and those other folks that are there, because that's my responsibility is the greater good rather than the individual. And, you want to be loyal, and it hurts to do that stuff. And, but, you also have that duty, like you said, to do your best for the other folks that are part of that. So that's a great challenge and a great mistake for sure.
Yeah.
What about influencers for you? What kind of support network have you had? Mentors or family or other folks, it's not easy to start a business. I'm in a lot of different groups, and I was lucky enough to have a family that was entrepreneurial too, and that's how I got started. So tell me about your support network, because for some folks they may not have any right now, and and that makes it harder.
Yeah, definitely. So this is huge for me, and because I didn't come from an entrepreneurial or privileged background whatsoever. My parents I'm a first generation. My parents immigrated here. They had me when they were 18. And they were working at a restaurant. So grew up really poor in Brooklyn. Now my parents are have made good careers for themselves and put themselves through school. But I grew up with no connections. There was no connections. No, English is my second language. There was just no, I kind of had to figure everything out from scratch, which I always had inclination to do from a younger age. And really I think the key is building an advisor network, right? And building a support network. Early on when I was in college, I was an entrepreneurial person. And I was always doing things, services, projects for folks, making money here and there where I could. And that was there were people that were willing to play an advisory role. And I asked for it. I was I want to be like you. I really like you. I'm willing to I'm at the point where I'm willing to do whatever. I'm willing to work whatever I need to do. I want to be like you. Tell me how to be like you, right? Folks who have made it, who have experienced success, they do want to find mentees, right? That's once you've made it and you've done all you've checked off all the things on the list, the next most fulfilling thing is for you to give back, right? And so they do want to play advisory and mentor roles. It is fulfilling for them, right? And so to find those kind of people and to actually even just put it just straight up I want to have a call with you every week, right? Would you do that? Can I tell you what I want to do, what I'm working on? Can we work through some life situations together? I'm trying to get to my next level, right? Here's what my goal is. They're down, they're open to it, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I started building my early advisor network, that where I even discovered oh wow, what is the venture ecosystem? What is a VC? Right? All these things, there's so much jargon in this community, and it's so insulated, and you kind of have to have someone introduce you and walk you through it and be here's how these things work in life, right? And so that's super important. And it started that way, which was really loose, but then it turned into formal advisory relationships where I would give people. Actually, when I started my company, I'd be I'm going to give you a percentage, or I'm going to give you, standard, advisory shares, depending on the level of the advisors. When you start a new company, is between a quarter of a point to a full point, depending on the quality of the advisor. And so I doled out some early on advisor shares that would vest off, and it's 2 to 4 year vesting schedule for those folks. What's interesting is with advisors, you actually outgrow them too, right? The same way you actually grow people you work with, your team, right? So I've actually had to also part ways with some advisors when they were you vested a year, okay, you've helped me a lot, but we're going to stop your vesting, reward you for all the time that you've spent, but also now I need to find an advisor that can help me do this next thing that you have never done before. Okay, I've already raised venture money, right? I know how to do that now, right? Now I need to know how to do this next thing, right? This is the next challenge. I need to find someone world-class at that, get them on board as an advisor. So selecting advisors, incentivizing them to come on board and aligning them with the growth of your company, but then also keeping them to you need to keep them to standards, right? So we're going to do a bi-weekly meeting. If that bi-weekly meeting starts being a waste of time, we're probably this probably doesn't make sense anymore, right? So yeah.
No, that's fantastic. Awesome.
Dan, I would like to throw one your way. I was careful not to get into any debate here in this interview today because I see your background in debate. So I would love to hear about how you took your debating skills. How have you used those in your business and in your business career?
Debate is the science of persuasion, right? I was always like in college. I did some sales jobs. Like when I say sales, I mean street sales. Like I sold makeup and phones on the street in Brooklyn, and that was like so. Debate was always like I was always a good writer and a good talker. Debate is like the best way to make use of those skills. I ended up, being the captain of the debate team, being ranked in the state of New Jersey, second in New Jersey, which is one of the most competitive states next to New York and California. I was traveling around the country in high school debating. It was what early on made me, first off, like hyper competitive and ambitious, because it is super competitive. Like we invest all our free time into at that level into the activity, and so like it actually kind of prepped me in some ways for like the level of commitment and dedication required to actually like compete in a hyper competitive setting. But also early on, I was like, oh, I'm good at debate. I want to be a lawyer, right? And then I talked to some lawyers and I discovered like this whole courtroom thing you see on TV, like that's not part of it. That's not realistic. Like 99% of being a lawyer is paperwork, right? And I was like, oh, that sounds boring. What's a job where I can like actually talk a lot, right? So I was like, okay, I don't want to be a lawyer. And then I discovered like sales and marketing, which like seemed more fulfilling. I was like, okay, like it's like literally persuading people, but at scale, right? And then that's where kind of like my interest fell. Like that's where because I was interested in that, I went down this like rabbit hole that led me into the sales world, that then led me into like the MarTech world. And when I discovered marketing technology, I was like, wow, it like literally we're living in a time right now as like this is the first generation where we're living in a time where to sell products at scale, you don't need to have hundreds of sales reps physically on sales floors selling things. You can actually automate all of it online and have like the power of thousands of in-person salespeople. It's like comparing like when cars came along to horses. Like I don't need like 100 horses to have 100 horsepower. Like I can just do it in this car. It's all automated, right? It's all packaged in this like automated thing. So that's when I was like, okay, that's really interesting. Let's dive into it. And that's kind of how we went down this journey. So it opened up like the window to me initially to enter the world. But I would encourage anyone to get involved in like a competitive, like extracurriculature activity, whether it's sports. Like a lot of folks, like I looked at debate as a sport, like which is nerdy as hell. But like a lot of successful entrepreneurs are like former athletes, right? I think being involved in a competitive activity, for fun on the side, is something that's really important to just like your personal development.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's winning and having that drive to win is definitely important. So I'm going to spin this around on you, asking out of the blue question. Let's assume that we are in a simulation. Who or what created it and why?
Yeah, I think that so I do think we are in a simulation. I think the likelihood that we're in base reality is really low. And like Elon Musk has some really interesting thoughts on this. He does spend a good amount of time talking about it. Actually, he's really interested in this topic. So what it would be was like humans, like if we could right now create a simulation, that would be like an accurate simulation where we would have the product we would have the ability to accurately predict the future and play out like multiple events, which would be the useful tool humans could ever create, right? Like if I could simulate right now what would happen if I said anything out of these 100 options in this podcast right now, and I could find the best possible outcome, right, and do that, I would be like an unstoppable force, right? And imagine how like governments would even be able to like weaponize some technology like that, right, where they could play out military scenarios and things like that. It's the most useful. We are currently right now, a lot of our the smartest people in the world are working on projects that are to create simulations, right? The biggest government R&D budget is going to building accurate simulations of our own society, and right now, like the exponential rate at which computing power is increasing is necessary for us. We need to hit a certain point for us to be able to render out accurate simulations. So like, all these factors are coming together. And so the answer is humans. Like we would create our own, like we are probably in a simulation of our own society, right? So and we do it to like, we could be just playing out some random situation that someone wants to see how it would work out if maybe 100 years ago someone pulled this lever instead of that lever, you know, when like Thomas Edison was inventing whatever, you know, like who knows, but yeah.
I have to point out, you know, you ask every employee that question and you get really impassioned in answering it. And it's very reflective of your product, of simulations and testing them, you know, and seeing what works best. So it's kind of intriguing. I don't know if you've ever like made those connections, but I mean, you've got some level of passion and interest in this idea, and you've now created a product from it.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Oh, now you're going to turn it around on us?
Yeah. This has all been. Yeah. I'm asking the questions now.
You know, I totally think it's a possibility, but the interesting thing is it seems like it spins in on itself. Is that, you know, like you said, we're increasing the technology power to get there. And I think we totally can, but then we're in a simulation that's getting to that point. And it's kind of, you know, I don't know, it's such an interesting thing of, you know, how does it continue to spin in on itself of if we're getting to that place? So I don't know. My feeling is that we're probably not in a simulation now, but I think that we will eventually get to that point. But then it wraps back around into itself that why haven't we gotten there already? So I don't know. It's a fantastic question for sure.
Yeah, I love it. I've thought a lot about it. I have a degree in philosophy, so this kind of stuff is the type of stuff I enjoy. But, you know, I think it's not something that we would know if we were in the simulation. That's the challenge with it. That being said, the philosophical side of me says, you know, what is the difference between, you know, true reality and a simulation as we know our existence? It's all relative. So I love the concept. I don't have any answers more than anybody out there.
Here's the thing, though. If you create a truly accurate simulation of your world in which you've created a simulation, then that simulated world will also create simulations of itself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like an infinite, it goes down.
Infinite loop. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I kind of asked the who and what. You know, it's interesting to me, the idea of like, you say that we created it. I mean, what if we are completely different beings and, you know, we created the simulation, but we put these slightly different people in there to kind of test out that scenario.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I mean, you never know. I mean,
right.
Maybe it's a race of intelligent frogs that wanted to see what it was like if you could stand up and walk around and how that would change their society.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. Exactly.
So, I mean, yeah, if you can tell me, I mean, that's where the who and what becomes fun, because then come up with all the different ideas of like who created the first simulation or what created the first simulation.
Right. I think that would set off a trigger of events that like would create parallel universes and stuff. Like there's that person creating the first accurate, like we do create simulations today, just not good ones. Like Sims, like Sim City, you know, like the computer game. That's supposed to, like, that's a simulation technically, right? But it's a bad one. It's not accurate, right? It doesn't have its own, like it doesn't go on its own. But what we can do to loop this back to Marpipe, that connection that you made is really interesting because we do see simulation potential with the data sets that we're collecting. So because we are the first platform for multivariate testing for creative, what we're seeing, we're now collecting the first at scale database of creative component intelligence, meaning we're collecting all this really interesting data about what different consumers, what visual stimuli they like to see or hate to see. And we can actually we can predict hey, this consumer segment, if you have this kind of product and you're advertising to this consumer segment, just don't show them purple. They hate purple, right? If you show them purple, we can predict that they would purchase at this amount. And if you show them green, we predict they will purchase at this amount, right? And so we can actually start predict the same way that Facebook, based on your credit card history and behavior, can predict your likelihood to purchase certain types of products. We can predict your likelihood to engage with certain types of visual stimuli, right? And so that's something that we have barely scratched the surface of, but is an exciting project we're working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, we're kind of coming up on an hour. What's next? What's the big, hairy, audacious goal in front of you in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah. So a few things. So right now, because we're experiencing really exciting growth right now, we want to double and triple down on the product to ensure that we hit that kind of runaway, volume, and we want to hit hyperscale, essentially, so to speak. And in order to do that, we're looking ahead to raising our next round of funding within the next 6 months. We're going to do our Series A. We already have a lot of the pieces for that coming together, so it's going to be a really exciting round. And we have a lot of really awesome names coming into the picture too on that. So if anyone listening to this is interested in having a conversation, reach out to me about that, and what that's going to allow us to do is actually unlock some really ambitious goals we have for our product. So right now, we can essentially allow you to, let's use the word for the sake of it, simulate tons of creative possibilities in the real world and understand what's your best case scenario for your creative. But tomorrow, right now, we're limited to just the image format and on Facebook and Instagram. What we want to do next is bring that sort of capability and that technology to Google, to Amazon's DSP, to LinkedIn, and also to the formats of not just image, but to video and audio, which we get tons of requests for. And so those are really complicated projects. And so, we want to be able to deliver that capability, to be able to take over, to be able to have access to more of the market because our product features enable it to. So those are the big goals. And obviously in the process, we're going to need to hire a ton of customer success people, engineers, product designers. And so if any of the folks listening are interested in what we're building and our mission, reach out to me. Let's talk.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's exciting.
Thanks.
For sure. No, really good stuff, Dan. I think that kind of wraps it up. This has been awesome. Appreciate your time. Everybody go check out marpipe.com. Reach out to Dan, and really cool product. I know Andy and I have been in there playing around with it, and pretty awesome. So thank you for spending this time with us. We'll keep an eye on you and Marpipe and see how things are going.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun. This was really awesome. And I can't wait to share this and refer people to the show. And I wish you guys the best in the upcoming recordings. I can't wait to watch.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was awesome. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.